FB sire agents of Reddit, what's something that you can tell us without killing us? If I can trust that she's telling the truth. There's an old lady in town who was in the FBI back in 50s 60s. She said Nikita Khrushchev was a short man. I was an analyst, not an agent officer. 85% of all classified material is classified because of how it was collected, not because it is juicy useful. Yes, you boss and co-workers said that crap about you. I heard, just 2 days ago, that there is a saying in the government, no one ever got fired for classifying a document, hence there is huge excess secrecy. My dad worked for GCHQ in the 80s doing voice recognition and he can't say anything more for a decade more. The way they can recognize you by Siri Google today was being used in the 80s, just a bit slower. I worked with the Australian Federal Police with the Spider Squad doing computer stuff for them in regards to pedis and finding trafficking victims. It is the most heartbreaking work, but when you get them the office looked like NASA after a Mars landing. Of course they have something called Spider Squad in Australia. Jeez. My high school girlfriend worked for the National Reconnaissance Office after college. At the time, they were responsible for analyzing the nation's spy satellite photos. She told me 2 things. 1. There's a special garbage chute for classified materials. It's in the hallway. When you are new, as a hazing ritual they tell you you have to shout your badge number down the chute before throwing in any materials. This is hilarious. 2. She wouldn't tell me anything about the resolution quality of the spy photos, of course, but she did let it slip that because Russian sailors will sunbathe nude on the decks of their submarines in the Black Sea. Several women in the office would pin those photos up in their cubicles as cheesecake beefcake photos. So a few decades ago, US spy photos could resolve Russian penis. Somewhat unrelated, but my great uncle was a FBI agent. Every time we would ask him if he had any interesting stories, but he would say he was sworn to secrecy. After 10 years of hearing this, my sister asked really and he responded with no, I just don't remember anything interesting happening. Girl's dad said his coolest memory as a CIA agent was New Year's Eve in Moscow, 1987. It was 39 degrees below zero with zero wind. Met an old, retired, CIA spook at a wedding reception. Spitting image of Cole Sanders. He was amazing. So I asked him, I don't want you to tell me anything you can't, but I'd love to know, when Kennedy got killed, what was the talk around the water cooler in the office? He didn't halt, or pause to think. Heck, we all thought Johnson did it. Johnson really did want to be president. Not an FBI or CIA officer here, but my sister is a district attorney, and over the years she has prosecuted a number of animal cruelty cases. This led to her having an ongoing partnership with the FBI for the last several years. It turns out the FBI started tracking animal abuse cases about 10-15 years ago due to the incredibly high correlation between abusing animals when you're young and becoming a serial violent offender as an adult. Netflix getting in on that too about a year ago. My dad worked for the government, and he told me that anytime he had a meaningful interaction with someone who wasn't American, i.e. going over to my friend's house for Lunar New Year, or going on vacation to Canada, he had to report it all, and if he saw anything suspicious. Yep, went through a clearance upgrade and got asked about a couple of people that I know through friends who I didn't include on my paperwork and if I knew their background. If you go through the FBI interview process, it takes a while. Chances are you're going to have to spend some time working on crimes against children, which is really tough and most people don't want to do it. Yeah, I heard a story here on Reddit about how somebody was involved in a case against a predator, and he had to go through every image on his hard drive to flag anything that was child P. That case drove him out of the industry. I can't even imagine. There is a book called Moscow Rules. It was written by 2 CIA people, all about, well, disguise. The CIA had all these agents in Russia, but the Russians were insane about following literally every single American in Russia, 24/7, looking for spies. So a huge part of their job was trying to shake off the KGB. They had crazy quick changeless guises, all sorts of stuff. The movie Argo was based on one of the writers somewhat. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but a mentor who definitely wasn't supposed to tell me used to be a white hat for the FBI. Apparently, all he did was search for pedophiles by tracking child pornography. He said he didn't stay for very long because it was messing with his mentality. Worked with a woman who was former NSA. We would always beg her to tell us crap, but she never did. The one thing she did say, though, was that during training they show them a video of a bunch of things they found out about and stopped. She said she hardly slept for 2 weeks after watching that. Operation Ivy Bells was a plan to tap Soviet communication lines. The cover story they used was that they had divers diving down to recover fragments of a new Soviet supersonic anti-ship missile. The communication line tap was a failure due to a spy. However, the dive teams successfully recovered all fragments of the missiles from the Soviet weapons tests. The US was able to reverse engineer one and subsequently learned they were radar guided only and the assumed IR guidance did not exist. Minor clarification, the tap was successful, and recordings were recovered by dive teams over many months. The tap was ultimately discovered by the Soviets because of information provided to them by Ronald Pelton, the spy you mentioned. Brian Bendis, creator of Miles Morales, author of House of M, etc., has a story about doing a talk at GBCI at Langley and being told to wait in a break room, not allowed to have his laptop, phone, his own notebook or pen, but was supplied with a notebook when he walked in that had be reviewed when he left. A young analyst walks in for coffee, sees him sitting there, recognizes him as famous comic book author Brian Michael Bendis, and starts to react like a fan. He then pauses, starts sweating, and quietly asks Bendis if this is a test of some kind. And quietly asks Bendis if this is a test of some kind. OMG, I love this. What a mind-bending experience it must be to work in a place like that where you need to worry about tests constantly. My aunt has been an FBI agent for 25 years. The only thing I know about her job is that she's an office administrator, but her information went public somehow when she was part of the team that investigated the Mandalay Bay shooting in Las Vegas. Someone found the name and address of most of the agents that worked that scene and put it up online. Not sure why. She also took me and my family on a tour of the Las Vegas FBI headquarters about 15 years ago. One thing interesting that I remember about the building is that all the doors were floor-to-ceiling 9-foot doors. Thought that was weird. All the doors were floor-to-ceiling 9-foot doors. Existence of reptilians confirmed. I'm not one, but my friend is. She went off the grid after she graduated college, got recruited by the SIA. She told us she was interested and majored in political science. I hope she's doing well. I'm still here, old friend. I just watch you guys from a satellite telescope, like what you did with the hair. I once rented out my old farmhouse to a family. They paid the rent every month, and other than mowing the lawn to save their life, I didn't think anything bad about them. That all changed when the D called me to inform me that my renter had been murdered in Mexico and was asking my permission to search the property. Well, it turns out I had unknowingly rented my house to the Mexican mob and they were using it as safe house. It all fell apart for them when 2 of them got caught with a duffel bag full of M. My renter had to go back to Mexico to visit his mother and was promptly murdered. Let's just say I no longer am a landlord and never will be again. 2 family stories, even though this will probably get buried. 1. My father's uncle told everyone for his entire life that he worked at a button factory. It was only revealed after his death that he, in fact, worked at a missile factory and assembled the gyroscopes for the guidance in missiles. 2. We always knew my grandfather worked for the government at the Pentagon. We never knew exactly what he did, but every 6 months or so he would call up to talk to my mom. The conversation was pretty much always the same. My mom and grandfather would catch up for a few, then the year would turn into, so I have another clearance upgrade coming up. You will probably get a call like always. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Surer than tea. A week later some government agency would call up. It was always a different one, and ask for my mom. They would ask a bunch of questions and that would be that. When he died from Alzheimer's, at his funeral, 4 men in black suits attended and no one knew who they were. After the burial, they approached his widow and handed her a plaque with 17 government agency symbols on it. Turns out he was responsible for interagency cooperation and training. He basically got everyone to talk to and teach each other. Now his son works for them. Doing what? We don't know and don't ask. Button Factory. That's a hilariously awesome cover. My great uncle told us late in his life that he didn't work for GE as an engineer his whole career. He actually worked for the CIA and that's all he would say. Also sounds like a top tier uncle style trolling maneuver lol. Not CIA but have worked with and know guys in intelligence. Most of the intelligence we get is from OSINT, open source intel, i.e. news articles, press releases, news networks and government announcements. Most people think that everyone in intelligence is some James Bond Jason Bourne type of individual when in reality, the majority of analysts sit at a desk and go through news articles all day. That said, that's not the only method we have to gather intel, but it is where most of it comes from. Even analysts that are using other methods such as GEOINT, IMINT and SIGINT spend their day cropping images for minute details or replaying and monitoring the same signal over and over again. Have a buddy who was a contractor for NSA. He's a programmer, and he monitored global social media for signs of social unrest, uprisings, coups. I talked with some CIA recruiters towards the end of college and almost applied earnestly after a large group Q&A and then a much smaller one. The thing that stuck out to me was that the guy said most CIA agents are out of shape and have limited combat training with guns or hand-to-hand. They made it clear that it's the military that uses force. If confronted they were trained to immediately surrender, or to drop their bags and run if possible. Fun fact, the I stands for intelligence, not incredibly deadly person. Want to work for them? Prepare to do a fair amount of paperwork. The form will ask for each of your employer contact information of friends, your history of addresses, etc. They will then send an agent to interview a number of these people. Next, you have to take a psychological exam and interviewed by a psychologist. Finally, you'll have one last interview with a polygraph and a professional lie detector. Not either of these, but I've had a clearance so I can weigh in a little. Two things. Firstly, most secret crap happens right in front of people's faces under the guise of being normal everyday stuff. Secondly, properly secret programs and operations are never named in any way that indicates what they actually are about. They're generally just two words chosen at random and that would rarely come up in normal conversation. Stuff like cracked gorilla, which I just made up off the top of my head. So when people talk about classified stuff and its name is super topical, it's either very old, or a nickname at best. Only public programs and operations have topical names as a PR motive, like Desert Storm. Operation Cracked Gorilla. I was told that would never see the light of day. Dangu. Usks. CIA have different specialists, like any government branch. Field agents, paper pushers, targeting officers, programs and plans officers, paramilitary officers, language officers, information resource officers. The list goes on. I'm available if you're looking for a middle-aged bulls artist. If you apply for a job at GCHQMI5/MI6/Filingdales etc., they will talk to every member of your close family and if any minor red flags come up you might not get the job. And also if you are Chinese, Russian, North Korean etc. I think that it probably goes to a grandparent or great-grandparent being from that country. You will not even be able to apply. Source: Stepdad was in MI6 and fun fact, if he wants to go to certain countries, Israel, he has to ask permission from the mod to travel there. I used to subscribe to an Asian American lifestyle beauty mag and every month the CIA ran ads about putting your heritage to use. Maybe off topic. I had dinner with a bunch of pasty white overweight dudes interested in hiring us for some RE consulting. We knew they worked for the Defense Dept, maybe Defense Intelligence Agency, but they couldn't tell us exactly who they worked for or what exactly they needed, at least not until we had clearance. At some point in the conversation I asked the one buff looking guy if he ever served in the military. He said he was a Navy SEAL. I looked at the other dorky looking dudes and asked them one at a time. They were all former Special Forces guys. I mean, you would never ever think any of these guys were Special Forces. They looked like regular IT guys. I don't know for sure, but my guess is that they were all CIA. Related, I was in the sauna at my gym when this naked old man with extremely long testicles started talking to me. Somehow the conversation ended up on the topic of my new roommate, who happened to be Saudi Arabian. He then proceeded to tell me he worked for the FBI and knew exactly who I was and asked if I would like to make some money every now and then for giving him information. I said sure, not because my roommate was sketchy, but because he got drunk one day and pee on my couch. This was 10 or so years ago and I never really heard from him, but I think my phone was tapped for a short span of time. Upvote for long testicles. I have a few friends that are CIA officers. First thing is that the people that work for the CIA are not CIA agents, they are officers. The people they recruit to spy for them are agents. Also, going on a tangent, I am 90% sure I have been one of those agents when I was dealing with a Mexican logistics company while working at General Motors. The logistics company we were dealing with was owned by a multi-billion-dollar Mexican clan, and all the ultra-wealthy clans in Mexico all have ties to various cartels. So some federal agencies got involved, mainly FBI and I believe a few D, but one guy was specifically not wearing any badges, was not willing to identify what agency he was working for, and questioned me on a lot of specific details of what the company's capabilities were. Though getting back on track, anyone who is a US citizen can apply to join the CIA. It isn't that hard. If you have any kind of degree in computer science, statistics, engineering, or accounting and don't have anything that would freak up you getting a clearance, getting a job would be relatively easy there. And as implied with that previous comment, working at the CIA is far more boring than you would think. Lots of tracing manufacturing capabilities, from what I described with that Mexican logistics company to finding out how China sources the components they use to manufacture their satellites. Most of the job is agents talking about looking forward to retirement, time wasted trainings, whining about the crappy new guys, how the job has changed, shady hiring practices, new policies designed to maximize agent liability while letting the old skirt chasers retire with BS lifetime achievement awards, and wondering how by the time you finally get that amazing career case, the passion, skill, and dedication you have when you started out is long gone because the agency doesn't really care about you or any of the other cogs. The US Attorney's Office isn't interested in anything they can't win without absolute certainty. Update. 2 other people agreed with me, and I apparently agreed with me as well. This is more support than you will ever get from your admins as a federal agent. This is the only reply that I respect as a legitimate answer. Burner account with a realistic answer is usually a winner. We have full access to Google's ad network. If we really want to track someone, we use that. Not a federal agent, but like come on, there's literally an API in the source code for it, and you think it's not being used? Everyone knows Reddit is full of government agents with high security clearance just waiting to endow us with their secrets. Not an FBI agent myself, but I recently was in frequent contact with an FBI recruiter about open positions I was considering, and what they told me was, the process of actually becoming an FBI employee usually takes between 1-2 years for all the necessary background checks and training exams. The FBI does all the stuff you see in the movies, just not as quickly. As I was watching some X-Files the night before, the recruiter told me that you can imagine that spooked me a bit. Special agents aren't spies, they're cops, which is ultimately why I didn't decide to go forward with the application, since the initial info session made it seem like special agents had more of a foreign diplomatic role than they do, which is what drew me in the first place. In the 80s 90s, with marginal seismometers and a little computing power, people in Australia tracked nuclear explosions. That's the cover story. Think about what people with today's seismometers and supercomputers can do. Worldwide fart detection network confirmed. When I applied for a clerical position with the FBI, someone on the subway unaccountably sat next to me and asked if I'd write her son and persuade him to apply to a school for the deaf. I'm deaf myself. How could she have known I was? So I wrote a letter. She and I met for dinner. Then we went our separate ways. I've always wondered about this. My father was in the Navy and ended his career working at the Pentagon. When the war started in Iraq, he'd flip out every time the news pushed weapons of mass destruction narrative. Lo and behold, there were none. I had a customer years ago that worked for the FBI in a support role. Tech stuff. He wasn't agent or anything. He signed up to coach Pee Wee soccer for his 5-year-old and met his assistant coach at the first game. Monday morning he got called into his supervisor's office to meet with some agents. Apparently his assistant coach was a well-known mafia boss, and they wanted to know everything he talked about. He was shocked, because A, he had no idea, and B, they did. My father works at NSA and doesn't tell me crap, so I wouldn't know, but I do have one thing to say: NSA is spying on you, not the FBI. I hope my NSA agent is having a good day. Sorry I'm boring. Was at a tech conference and NSA had a booth with phone chargers. Nobody used them the entire conference. They were friendly. Asked me if I had the slides from the presentation my boss gave. Told them yes, I can get them, but actually I'm surprised you didn't already have them. When I was 16, I became very close, very fast friends with this guy in my school choir. His dad went on business trips for his work at Lockheed Martin 3 or 4 times a month, always to Chicago. This kid who was my friend, we went everywhere together for about 3 months, after being very casual acquaintances for about 2 years. After school we'd hang out till 10 PM or so almost every night. We'd get lunch at the same time and in the same place. We switched our class schedules to be in the same history or language arts sections, etc. Just your basic nerdy dudes finding a kindred spirit. I guess our sudden friendship raised an eyebrow or two because one day my friend came to school and said that his dad was asking him lots of questions about me, who my parents were, what my house was like, did he ever meet my siblings, was I an obedient student or was I snarky. My buddy suspected the questions were being relayed from his dad's boss. TLDR. The government entertained the possibility that I was a threat to our missile systems or satellites or something as a high school junior. My ex was married to a FBI agent and was told many times about the insanely long interview period. She mentioned they went back to even interview his kindergarten teacher. She also told me if there truly was anyone in your life that was a CIA agent, you would never know. They would truly be sworn to secrecy and there would never be an instance of them causally mentioning or bragging, hey, I used to work at the CIA. Those people don't actually work for the CIA. So the idea anyone would comment here with actual connection with the agency is slim to none. Lots of people work for the CIA in non-clandestine roles though. I wasn't FBI sire, I was NSA, but was integrated with both for a few assignments, and the biggest thing is that it's all way more office space than Tom Clancy. Also, every cafeteria has a buffalo chicken salad day, and it's usually the best thing they serve. Dude, you're not supposed to mention the buffalo chicken salad. That's in the handbook. You are fired when mom finds out. I stayed with an FBI agent in a hotel for a weekend. I can tell you that he likes Saturday Night Live and seemed like a decent guy. I need to know which era of Saturday Night Live before I form judgment. While in college, 1978-79, this textbook in my policy class told of a time when Nixon was in office, demanded to leave the White House to go to a musical, and planned no prep for anything. Major crap storm for the Secret Service. Eventually they got Nixon to calm down and they never went out. One of our close new neighbors happened to work for the Secret Service. His family came over to our family home for dinner one evening. Eventually it came out he worked on the Nixon detail a few years back. That's when I shared my story I read in my textbook. He actually almost dropped his fork and sat there with his mouth wide open. Apparently the story was not only true but was supposed to be a secret. I showed him my book and he notated the author. I have no idea the outcome, but it made the night more interesting. My parents' neighbor is an FBI agent. He thinks he's above the law and can park in front of the stop sign at the end of the street. Local cops wouldn't ticket him despite numerous complaints. Played beer-pong with him at a block party. He's an accountant. He did not like me calling him nothing more than a forensic accountant with a badge. I have no idea if the following is true, but it was recounted to me about 20 years ago by someone with epic credentials and I've never heard the story in any other media. So here goes. Before the Berlin Wall came down, Soviet radio operators used to carry their own activation keys for the military radio sets. There were slight differences in the electrical properties of each operator's key which minutely adjusted the broadcast signal properties. Even though the main radio equipment was dotted around the place, the Western powers were able to determine which keys were used and so track individual operators by closely analyzing the transmission properties. The NATO listeners couldn't break the messages themselves, but the intel was still very useful. Normally only a few Soviet operators were active in peacetime, but if there were tensions or military exercises planned, more would be brought in. One day every operator started transmitting in relay. All of them were sending messages. It was a sign that something big was afoot, but the NATO commanders had received no advance intelligence of any activity at all. This was highly unprecedented, unique even. They started to panic. Could it be a prelude to an attack? What were the Ruskies up to? Plans for counter scenarios and even possible first strike actions were warmed up just in case the unthinkable happened. Then, one of NATO's own radio operators noticed something strange. Radio equipment also had an identifiable broadcast fingerprint separate from the operator keys, and he noticed all the transmissions were originating from the same equipment at a single location close to the east-west border. He passed this information up the chain of command with a recommendation to send a spy plane over the top to see what was going on. One was immediately scrambled. The pictures that came back immediately pissed off the generals. The Ruskies were indeed using their operators to send messages from one location. Each operator was lining up in a long queue, entering a radio building, broadcasting a brief radio burst, then retrieving their key and moving to the back of the queue to wait their next turn. But the shape of the line was what annoyed the military brass. The Russians had found out their operators were being tracked and knew how NATO would react given the activity they created. The line snaking around the radio building was in the shape of the hammer and sickle. I don't know what the Russian is for FCKU, but that was definitely the message on that picture. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.